You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. On this episode, we'll be talking about two things that are very interesting topics to me. Actually, probably for like the last 2 or 3 years, I've wanted to cover these topics, and I just happened to luck out to where Brandy had mentioned them to me. And the thing is with this, even with this episode, even though we're covering Synanon and Esalen, this does kind of continue on from the Matthew North stuff that we covered a while ago. And going forward, like, I'm not going to keep putting like the work of Matthew North, but I'll mention it in the episodes as we go along. But like, I guess we are kind of like doing, I guess, like a series of going like a little bit more deeper into his work, but still going to probably arrive at the same conclusion. We're just, in my opinion, just showing more evidence and more connections than he did in the time that he was doing what he was doing. So, with that said, just keep that in mind. Like, as these shows go on, this is going to eventually start connecting to things that are going on right now. We're just taking it back, and there were topics that, like, again, I was saying I was heavily interested in Synanon and Esalen. I think that literally could even go back to the whole, I've mentioned it before. I've had, in my past, I did for about 5 years, I had a drug problem. I was a dope fiend. I've been to rehabs and detoxes. I've even been like, when I went to the feds for steroids, I had a lawyer that somehow made the judge think that I was addicted to using steroids. So I got a drug program while I was in there. I got time knocked off. So, like, I've been exposed to these things, and looking back at it now, especially once I started getting into conspiracies or like really MK Ultra, I was like, this is very much like kind of MK Ultra-ish to me. I do think that there are techniques that are used in this place that really is very much like MK Ultra. And I do think that odds are you're probably going to come out a little bit more screwed up than you went in. You might be dry, but you've probably been programmed to like go off the deep end with other things somewhere else. That's just my opinion. So I do find this stuff interesting because I do think at one point, at some time, I guess it's probably really with these companies too, maybe like Phoenix House and like a few other ones, but I think they all kind of came after them. I really do think at one point the government or some three-letter agency realized that they could probably use bad kids or drug addicts as a way to get parents to hand over their children for experiments. There's a lot of video documentation on these places if you were to even start looking them up, to the extent that I actually find it weird because, like, in my opinion, these people knew what they were doing was not really normal. They were even in ways trying to hide from the public what they were doing. So why are you going to have so much on film when you're like, fuck, this is going to show what we're really doing? And it's because I honestly do believe, and first off, even think of this, going back into the 70s or 80s, it wasn't really, maybe the 80s, I don't think it was normal for an everyday person to actually have a video camera. It was very expensive. I do think that what was going on is, besides notes, we're also doing video documentation on our experiments. Maybe we can read somebody's body language when they're doing something to somebody else. Maybe we can read that person's body language when we're approaching them. Maybe we could watch if they twitch, just anything, how they talk. I really do think a lot of that video that you will see if you were to even go like look into Esalen and Synanon and some of the ways that they ran their groups, there's a lot of footage, and I do think a lot of it was actually just to document, and they could go over and see what's working and what's not. That's my opinion, and I do think this stuff runs deep, and I do think it's also a grift for money. So with all of that said, I guess that's my whole spiel about why I do find these very interesting. Again, like I've said for like at least the last 2 years, I've wanted to cover Synanon separately and Esalen. But conveniently, they both tie in this episode. So then again, this one might be even a little bit longer, just letting people know on the live before it gets going. I'm assuming maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, because between these two women right here, I already know there's going to be more than enough information. And I don't want them to have to censor themselves or cut anything off. So I would, this may be a lengthy one, but I really do think if you pay attention, you're going to see just a ridiculous amount of connections between the government, drug pushers, and all sorts of weird shit. So that is enough out of me. Lisa, thank you very much for coming back on again. Always appreciate you coming on, and I always appreciate when you like cover a topic too, because I know you'll do your best at it. And same thing with you, Brandy. Thank you very much for finally coming on. I know this was at one point you're probably like, this dude is just talking shit. We're not really coming back on again. But I sometimes I think Lisa knows it now because of working with me so much, is that I'll end up putting too much on my plate, and it's just I have to like pump the brakes and get back to where I was. Get like shiny object syndrome. I go from one topic to the next and forget that I just spoke to somebody else like a week ago. But finally made it happen, and thank you both very much. And I guess we'll really just kind of, Brandy, I think we'll just let you kind of take it off from here and let us know where you want to go with this.
Well, I guess maybe we can kind of like start with Esalen, but then mix in the Synanon, since Esalen pretty much set up the framework for how Synanon would be ran. They have the same concepts. They have the same influencers. It's just more of a psychological run, but they try to put it as an askew program, as if something like that never existed before, although it had, it just ran under different names. So, mostly with the Esalen, instead of focusing on today and some of the topics we know of today, it was like I wanted to get to the bottom of like Aquino saying that Esalen was founded by Russians, and it's like, okay, well, we knew about the mind war stuff, and some of the mind warping and Third Reich psychological breakthroughs over there, because most of psychology and sociology come from like Russia, Germany, Vienna, all over there. So I wanted to know like where exactly was he getting it from. So I took the founders of it and seeing who it was that they were being influenced by. And we're talking about people, not only they were influenced by, they were like right beside of them. Like Alan Watts was their friend. There wasn't a fanboy situation. He was part of their family. Even, who was it? I have to pull him up.
Just while you're pulling stuff up,
Yeah.
Alan Watts gave the first lecture at Esalen. And so he, very, very much a part of the establishment of Esalen. And I think even the main founding guy credits him as well as being an influence of the creation of it.
Yeah. Abraham Maslow, another guy that, is like an iconic figure as far as sociology and psychology goes. But he was actually so close with Michael Murphy that he said he was the son he never had. So these weren't people that helped influence them. These were people that actually came in and helped develop the programs that we have now with them running. So the people that are going there now are in programs established by these people. It's not a one-off. They came in and they set it up. So all their MK Ultra connections, all these other LSD connections, these people were not influenced by them. They were in the facility setting up the programs and running them as they are now. And that's kind of like the same way with Synanon. It came from that same structure.
You know what I even had thought was very weird with Synanon? And I mean, it's kind of funny how, like, I don't know. I mean, I would even say this goes for, like, people that are very religious. You will think one way, but then figure out a reason to contradict this and think another way. But, like, in AA, they'll say, like, well, 2 dead batteries really can't start a car. Stuff like that. Or, like, maybe, like, if you're going to have somebody help you through the steps, it should be somebody who has, like, a working knowledge of them. It's not, like, another motherfucker who just came out of detox. But yet when you go into these rehabs, and the Synanon was real big on it, and that's another thing that I found interesting once I realized that, is that like rehabs that I have been in have used their group therapy ways. That's like, if anybody listening to this show has ever gone to a rehab, if you have gone to group therapy, either an hour and a half or 2 hours out of the day that you do that, it was more than likely based off of Synanon or Esalen. And it's more of like, oh, well, we let the addicts run the group. So you're letting sick people help sick people. You're always going to stay fucked up that way.
Synanon's whole thing, yeah.
Well, they still actually do this because, like my day job, I work for a state MCO, and that is what we do is mental health and substance abuse. And I always wanted to know why it is when we put people back into the community that we put them back into the community in which they got their problem from. And it didn't make sense to me because I was like, well, if you want to elevate yourself, everybody knows in order to elevate yourself, you free yourself from the current environment that you're in and you move to the environment in which you want to be in, and then you acclimate and you keep doing so. So if we're taking these people who have these issues and dumping them back out into the same environment, they are going to continue doing what they were already doing. You're not providing a solution. But legally, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to tell them, you can't go back to that community because of X, Y, and Z, because they have to have that freedom of choice. And if you're giving someone who already has issues and mental issues and issues with substance use, because they're usually one and the same, they're going to choose the community that they came out of because they know how to operate and function in that community. They're not going to get any better. Now they are a lifetime client, which is why I think both Esalen and Synanon preach that you will forever be an addict. There is no post-addiction. You are always treating yourself throughout your life. You have to accept once an addict, always an addict. And that is just rolled over into our way of treatments today. It didn't stop.
There's even things I think like which Synanon I think was really big with, which is why I think people like even chose to stay there, longer than they needed to or whatever. But like even in AA or other things, they will tell you like, if you don't do this, you're going to drink. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. Now if I believe that, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The fuck. If I don't do 90 meetings in 90 days, I might drink again. If I don't get a sponsor, I'm going to drink again. If I don't do the steps, I'm going to drink again. Fuck, man. And it's like, and then the thing is that people, in my opinion, from things that I have seen, they'll start throwing these slogans around just because you're not acting or thinking like they do. So now it's like, I'm going to make you feel bad because I'm fascist and I want you to be the way I want you to be. And these slogans will put guilt into people and make them do things.
That's part of the conditioning. You come in, you get conditioned, you join these groups, they reinforce the conditioning. When one person acts out, then they're allowed to attack that one person. And that was a big Synanon thing, is that attack therapy with the game, is that you call out all the person's faults, everything that you find wrong with them, whether it's even a legitimate accusation or not. You would accuse people of doing stuff they hadn't already done, just so they could somehow be relieved of their anxiety and guilt. But at the same time, there are people that ended up cracking and admitting to horrendous things that now you have not only on video, but everybody. You've got like 50 witnesses saying, like in that Synanon documentary, you threw that baby in a trash can. And now we all know it. Nobody's going to not hear that. We all heard it. We all know you did it. So the only thing that's keeping you out of jail is you staying in therapy. So you could never leave, because if not, you could be tried for that crime.
It almost seems like they were reinforcing codependency. you have a disease, but you can never get cured of the disease. And by definition, if you get a disease, you build immunity, and then you can never get it again. So it's weird. It was always weird to me that they use the word disease in with that. But it's almost like when they set you up with and of course, I've never been to AA, so I'm speaking from a novice point of view. But they set you up with a sponsor or whatever, and you always have to have that sponsor with you. They always create this codependency that you have to always fall back on, and not so much a sense of independence. But again, that's my novice viewpoint. And it seemed like with these cults, it's the same thing. It's this codependency. They lure in people who have a propensity for codependency and then just feed into that codependency like on steroids.
You know what I think is like really, I mean, it's not probably as extreme, but I think this is interesting, and I think it really kind of is almost the same thing. I've even said this before about why I think I guess like why podcasting can kind of get fucked up. Like, you have a lot of people that are coming into this community because they're actually looking for something. They're looking for answers. And there's people out there that have shit to sell that know they can take advantage of people that are desperate looking for answers. You have people going to these places that are looking for help to the point where it's like, fuck it, at this point I'll just let somebody else run my life because obviously I can't. And then you get a fucking psychopath running it. Or people who think that actually they're to help think that this is because they've been told this is what works. You know what I'm saying? You know, doing it. Unfortunately. But like, I do think it's, you both have a group of people that are in the position to be taken advantage of.
Yeah. Yes. And that still stands. That exists right now. We have groups that are called peer supports, and that is their role. And the way that you are a peer support is you used to have a condition, or you used to struggle with that addiction, and now you are mentoring these people who are coming in with addictions. We have that in place. They are still using it. This is what they do. So, and they get paid good, actually. I mean, you know, me as a data analyst, they probably get paid more than me. And sometimes I'll make the comment, oh, well, if I had an addiction, maybe I can get another 10K out of my, you know, my life. You're rewarding this shit. But it's a racket. It's a money scheme. And they're not going to get rid of that.
You know, and one thing I want to mention before we move back to where we were. It was just something that popped into my head. I remembered, and I just want to make sure I mentioned it. Because I had found this weird, too. I think it was when I found out about, like, skull and crossbones. And, like, you hear this whole story. I mean, even with my own experience with the OTO, it wasn't a casket. But you do get put in something. And they do make it seem like they're closing it on you. This guy, I remember a counselor, he used to, like, brag about, like, I guess he was happy, you know, he was an ex-addict. And he used to be able to brag how he came from a TC. And I'm pretty sure it was either Apple or, like, even older. So now at this point, you are getting into Synanon, time, and influence, for sure. And he told me that one of the things they used to do that he said it would mind fuck the most gangster motherfucker in that place is that they would actually, like, bring in a casket and start, like, reenacting, like, you or your family's fucking death. Mm-hmm. And he said motherfuckers would be bawling. I was like, yo, that is like, you got to go that far to get somebody not to get high?
Well, that's pretty much the basis of group therapy. You're re-traumatizing that person. So every time you have to come in, introduce yourself, and tell your story, you are re-traumatizing. You are opening that back up. And when you are vulnerable and re-traumatizing yourself at that point, that is no different than having some mantra on loop reprogramming your brain.
Yeah. And it never goes away. It's reinforced. Yeah.
It is. Sure. It's really, that's what it is. It's reinforcement of the same patterns of behavior. So you're never going to think any better about yourself. You're always going to have that nagging
victim mentality.
Yes. So it's just going to carry with you. And what I have found, even working in this system for at least 20 years, is when you have parents that are in the system, and I've seen this, I've seen kids that are in the system whose one or both parents are in the system. When they end up growing up and they are in the system, they have kids, and guess who's in the system? Their kids are in the system. So they are just recycling themselves back into the system. And the only difference between Synanon and Esalen is money. you have rich people that are totally loaded in the system, and they get to dictate the lower system. And then you have Synanon, who is picking people out of the streets and putting them in the system. It's the same system, different class, ruled by the same people.
But and you also had a period of time where people, when they were getting kicked out of a building in Santa Monica, you had celebrities come in and start pouring in a whole bunch of money wanting to help them. So you do have the money aspect on some level, and then they had enough money to move into that bigger building. So, you know, it's eventually these think tanks end up getting heavily funded by the same philosophy people. Or people who hold the same philosophies, But I was going to say, with Esalen, you have these mystic extrapatriates, right? These people who claim to have had mystical experiences and have now this insight. And these are the people that were basically everything was based off of. And I guess with Michael Murphy saying that he accredits them to being influential and also molding his idea of Esalen. And he goes into a little bit, and he talks about how, he took a class, hold on. Sorry. He took a class with Spielberg out of Stanford. And at that class, hold on.
Gotta get you a drink of water.
Sorry. No, go. Sorry. Okay, so in that class at Stanford, it was Alan Watts who recruited Murphy and asked him to go to, I believe it was attend the Academy of Asian Studies, which I think now it's called California Institute of Integral Studies. But it was Watts who was going to Stanford and recruiting people to his philosophy classes. And it almost feels like, you get this Murphy guy out of Spielberg's class, you groom him for a couple of summers, and then all of a sudden he goes on to create this now Esalen Institute. And as a thank you, Watts is now the first lecturer when Esalen opens.
Well, you got Watts was definitely in there. I mean, this is what I thought was crazy. When he decided he wanted to experiment with psychedelics, it's not like he went and asked his friend for some drugs, or he went and asked people that he knew. No, he had a direct connection to a doctor that came from England over to Canada, who was bringing in the LSD and mescaline so that they could do the research at UCLA, at Stanford, because Stanford is at the heart of all of this.
Yes.
But he was one of the MK Ultra scientists involved. So you have Alan Watts in Esalen with that direct connect to these pure, lab CIA funded psychedelics. And this is what they're giving to the people at Esalen. They're bringing it right on through. And then I was going to say the difference too with Synanon and Esalen, Esalen's whole thing is, bliss out and drop out. And then you have Synanon doing the opposite, saying, no, you will forever be an addict. You'll never get to escape. Mm-hmm. So they're preaching the duality of the whole reason why they're there to begin with.
Yes.
So one of them is doing the whole shadow work, the Synanon, and the other is doing the whole, I'm the most enlightened being in this room at the moment because I took XYZ and put them together and meditated.
Right. And that one professor that you were talking about, UCLA guy, Keith Dittman, I think was his name. He was first a researcher at the Alcoholism Research Clinic at UCLA Medical Center, and then moves on to neuroscience and psychiatry within the medical center there at UCLA. And he was serving as the main researcher for brain mapping, or mapping the brain in and of itself while on LSD. I think they said something like he, just in his tenure, he approximately delivered 600 therapy. He had 600 therapy patients and delivered over 1,100 trials of LSD to experimental studies. So, I mean, they were heavily experimenting with LSD. And, he goes on to work with animals. And if Dana's still in the chat, I think she'll appreciate this. Didman's work was expanded upon as a drug consultant for San Diego Zoo. And that they not only took him to Africa and used some experimentation on tranquilized animals out there, but they also were doing, potential experimentations with dolphins and LSD. So it's interesting that he comes into play with all that, and he was one of the psychiatrists that testified in the Tate LaBianca Myrtle trial against Manson, against Manson, right? I think it was against him.
he was the expert witness as far as what the LSD would do to affect people, and for him to be brought in the same way you have Lily, and then you also have the rats of Nim. They're all at this research institute now. They're working on animals,
right?
Yeah, and then it was Janiger is who Alan Watts and Huxley got their LSD and mescaline from. He was just the same. He was in there doing the CIA MK Ultra experiments and just funneling it through them to give to people at Esalen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Alan Watts did mention in one of his write-ups saying that he met with Keith Dittman and did LSD with him, and that he went on to say that Aldous Huxley and Gerald Herod, which were people from Esalen, influential to Esalen, that they were also doing LSD trials with Keith Dittman. So now you have that connection back to Keith. And that, you have them trying to do mystical experiences or induce mystical experiences. And I think one of the main thing is that they had tried the drug on alcoholics, and they saw that, they were mapping it out in the brain, and they saw that they could get them close to a mystical experience. And they wanted to know, how does this compare to people who have actually already had a mystical experience? And that's why they recruited these mystical expats and had them do LSD and then compare the two. And I think it was Watts that said, it got me pretty damn close. I mean, it wasn't a true mystical experience, but because I had already had one, but it got me pretty damn close. Yeah.
And they're still running those at Esalen now. So when you come in and you do a week in, if you can afford a weekend or a week with them, you are part of an experiment. They are watching and taking notes on your experiences.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, the trials have continued for sure.
Well, that's what I think a lot of it was back in the past with Synanon, like trials. Like, that's why I think there was so much videotape of it. It's because, like, even then, they probably had a theory, and they were like, we have to critique it and make it work now. Because, like, now we're actually using it on humans.
They needed to say it was the first treatment of its type in order to roll out all the treatment processes that we have now, because CDU came out of the Synanon, and there are still these wildlife programs that are operating now, and they still have the same issue of them getting accused of brainwashing kids or not treating the kids the way they need to be treated by experts, losing them getting molested, abused in some manner. So they've pretty much developed the mental health system we have right now. And then when you go back to how everybody thought it was a big deal about the Operation Paperclip, they brought in all these scientists. Well, what you're seeing with Esalen and the influences that brought this together is you're seeing the other side of it, where they brought in all these Russian and Vienna psychologists over here. They migrated them right in. So Paperclip is kind of like a distraction. Yeah, we brought in scientists. Okay, but you brought in a lot more. You brought in science, and then you brought in the people that you needed to put these programs into place so that you can have a brainwashed conformist society by the era we're living in now, when they are bringing about all these different programs so that they need people to fall in line with.
Yes. And to your point of that, I think also when they were researching this LSD trials, they were trying to find something that would render the patient suggestive or render the patient persuaded. And so when you come out of a World War II and even prior to, you're looking at all this weaponry, you're looking at all this mental mapping, you're looking at potential weapons, like mental weapons, and you look right into LSD, that's what exactly they were doing. They were trying to find the perfect drug to find someone to be suggestive, and as well as during interrogation, can they use that as a truth serum? And so they were just throwing it all out to different people and seeing what would stick.
Well, you also have these traumatized victims from that. And, that makes it even easier because they're going to think the LSD is like a relief when actually you just combine that with their trauma and you can come up with their trigger words, their safe words, their operational manuals for them. Mm-hmm. And they had already said, like the Dr. Keith guy, that he put it right out there in the testimony that the LSD does in fact make this person easily suggestible to influence. So yes, they could indeed have committed murder just by taking the LSD, and supposedly Manson knew that. Yep. Now, if he's the expert and they called him in, then why would Manson know that? Wouldn't that make Manson the expert? But,
No, it's true. It's true. And, he, in that testimony, he also talked about how the LSD tended to alter a person's values. And it's like, well, then why are they, if he is the expert, right? Let's just say Keith is the expert here. Why are they pushing LSD on people, on society now? If it alters a person's values, if it makes them more suggestible, if it makes the individual more malleable. And no one questions that actual statement. And he apparently did so much research on it.
Or even questioning why it is these things are being legalized at this point. Because once these drugs are legalized, then that means they're also marketable. And that means that they can put patents on certain strains. And so now you have so many different synthetic strains out here that you're not getting the product you used to get illegally. No, you're getting the government's synthetic process. And because they've already had this experience of being able to brain map and modulate with certain chemicals, that's what they're putting in these synthetics to cause this specific reaction in the people who are going to get the synthetic psilocybin and synthetic THC.
No, that I'm so glad you said that, because I mentioned this to Nick earlier, is that when Alan Watts did his LSD trip, and granted it was, I think, the first one or something, he had already done or had a mystical experience, and he said it had a Chinese flavor. But when he did LSD, he said it had a Hindu flavor to his mysticism. And so you almost wonder, and I was telling Nick, I was like, you almost wonder if these different psychoactives or psychedelics have their own persona. Like, do they model the land that they came from and give you that flavor? And if they can isolate that in the lab, like you just said, and create all these strains, now they can pinpoint exactly where in the brain they want to modulate the behavior.
Or if he was even under that suggestion, because the mescaline, I think that was the first that he had done. He was already interested in the Asian studies. So I'm wondering if they were like, okay, he was exposed to this. We gave him the mescaline and he's thinking, okay, Asian. But then we keep pushing him on and giving him more access to other type of gurus and such. Then he gets involved in the Hinduism and they're like, okay, we'll try this one now and see if it brings about this new experience. And he's just associating them with the different drugs themselves.
That could be. But then you almost see this Hindu push from these DMT cults.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you see that flavor coming through.
Even with the peyote, that's always exclusively associated with natives. So you're going to get that type of experience. But that also goes into this whole UFO cult about them having so-called, oh, I get into this DMT and I'm speaking to aliens. So it's like, okay, everybody's gotten assigned a figure to what drug that they take. And it's like, okay, well, you took DMT and you've seen aliens. Okay, well, what about when you smoke some weed? Did they come out and ask you, for a hit or what? Yeah. It almost never happens. So maybe it's just your brain telling you that DMT makes aliens appear. You didn't have an experience. You were tripping. Yeah,
exactly. No, that's interesting. And, and then if you go into who Keith worked with, he worked with Sidney Cohen. And Sidney Cohen did his medical degree in Germany. And so he comes back, and he also is working at UCLA School of Medicine, becomes faculty member, was part of the Army, what have you. He's also working at NIMS division, narcotic abuse, and what have you. And both of them do some time doing LSD trials for the MK Ultra experiments that were happening simultaneously prior to, or they were associated with the actual trials that were happening at Harvard. So
but then you also have delirium coming in too, where they introduce an even stronger psychedelic that can influence a number of people with the same hallucination. And it's all spawning from the same people, same place.
But, and Keith even said it too. He was talking about how it induces artificial psychosis. And it almost makes you wonder, because during this time, I think it was in the 1920s, most of the scientific community, especially in the US, was obsessed with researching schizophrenia. And it almost seemed like they literally went down the periodic table and tried every single element to see what it would do to schizophrenia. And that's how they came up with lithium as a treatment. But with LSD, they said that there was an offshoot where they were actually looking at LSD to induce schizophrenia or induce psychosis so that they could look at it, map it, as well as create a model for it and possibly treat it. So it's weird that they're actually using it as a model for schizophrenia.
Problem solution.
It's interesting to even use it to induce schizophrenia. I would assume either you're giving high doses or you're not telling the person you gave it to them.
Right.
Because if that was to happen to me and I've never done that stuff before, I could see how somebody would be like, yo, I've lost my mind.
Yeah.
Why? What is wrong with me?
According to the literature, they said that about anywhere between 100 to 200 micrograms was sufficient enough to induce artificial psychosis. Again, but what are you talking about? A first-time user? Are you talking about a long-time drug user? Are you talking about a really tall person? Are you talking about a child? I mean...
Well, and then you have their ever-evolving definitions of what they feel like a psychosis episode is, because they can even pull in your political views and values, because Germany did that too.
No, that's true. That's very true. Yeah. That's a good point. And I think going back to the whole Harvard thing, so when I read that, and I think you posted that on your blog about Synanon, not to get ahead of ourselves or anything, but they started talking about how that whole trauma, throwing dirt at each other and basically telling each other sins and holding themselves accountable. It reminded me of the experimentation that was happening in Harvard prior to MK Ultra with Henry Murray. And I keep beating this horse, I swear. But he was the guy that pretty much pioneered or did the trials pre-MK Ultra. And he did the 22 students, and they basically confessed all their sins and then basically turned on them and showed them their sins, so to speak. And it was this trauma-based experimentation. I believe there was some psychedelics involved. And out of this experimentation, you get Ted Kaczynski. And he obviously goes on to do what he did. But it was Henry Murray that pretty much pioneered this trauma-based experimentation. And so if you look at some of the MK Ultra type experiments, you see trauma-based experimentation with a psychedelic. And so, and it just keeps going, whether it's Occult, whether it's Esalen, whether it is the Henry Murray stuff or MK Ultra or Project 112, you just keep seeing that theme play over and over. The only thing that changes is the actual test subject, whether they know what their level of intelligence is, their age range, level of abuse.
And they love to do that with military personnel specifically because they are subjected to trauma a lot. Because, I mean, as far as military goes, like our boot camp was basically just trauma bonding. That's what it was. We experienced all this together. And for the most part, when you talk to people who have been in the military, you still have the same military friends, no matter how long it's been throughout your life. And it's just due to that trauma bond. And why not? They own you, they can experiment with you, and they have already controlled the conditions. Yeah. So it's easier. Yep.
Was there anything else that you guys wanted to move on to, like something different? Because I know that you both had multiple different things. Or if I didn't know if like maybe we kind of got off the topic. Yeah, but...
I'll say we drove.
No, it's just I also like feel like, not that it wasn't all. I mean, it's all this stuff's relevant. I just feel like we are a lot farther than where we started. So I was wondering if there's something else you wanted to jump on. Oh no, I'm not complaining at all. No, it's like I don't even know where to go back to.
We can start getting into some of these associated funders of all these programs that you know usually don't get into. Like. What I found real interesting was the Joseph Campbell. Like, he was obviously influential and developed some programs with Esalen. But, I mean, you have a guy who pretty much brought Star Wars together up and out of there. But he knew the money people. He knew Lawrence Rockefeller. He knew the Mellon family. He got them to fund a lot of things dealing with Esalen, and even Alan Watts, when he needed, you know, more funding, these people had just direct access to these people. And like Lawrence Rockefeller was so involved with Joseph Campbell that when Joseph Campbell died, like he paid for his belongings to be moved to that museum. And he was also a member of that Joseph Campbell Foundation. He was a member of the board before he even died. Then, of course, we all, like, if you listen to John Warner, he usually tells it, not Chris Mellon, because he's all on the UFO front, but he will tell you how their family was involved heavily in mysticism and speaking with the dead. And I think it was his stepmom specifically, or maybe his grandmother, but they were involved in a whole different group, which I had never even heard of. And that was also a ring for where everybody that's involved in Esalen, like Alan Watts and all them, they were involved in this this little cult. I call it a cult, but it sounded like a cult as well. And I'm looking it up so I can get the name of it, because I had like never heard of this group. It's Eranos. I want to say it's Eranos. It's Eranos, that group. And that group was funded by the Mellon family. So you had them all speaking together. And mostly it was the same people that were also involved in some of the Bolshevik lead out and Lenin as well. The whole Bolshevik, and then they had there was another sect of even Bolsheviks, but they were all involved in this group. And it's just funny how they have them involved in this group, and those same groups that come out of that culture then move over here and introduce that same method. We'll just call it method acting, because that's pretty much how they are. Method acting over here and say, hey, we got these two kids right here. They want to develop some stuff. Let's help them roll this out, because we just came over here discussing how we can get this together. And it comes right out of Russia and Germany in their war.
You
To
think
your-
like
to your-
I mean, I think you guys kind of like touched on it before, and like this really this isn't because I do like pointing the fingers at Nazis, but I mean, I do like even assume a lot of this is probably very Nazi-esque.
Yes.
You know, like I would assume like this is probably like styles. Like I think we kind of really said this just in different ways, but like I have even wondered like, you know, is that like we'll see how they react on drugs, we'll see how they react not on the drugs. You know, with the attacking them physically, you know, see if you can break them down. It just seems like a very Nazi type of stuff.
Well, just the fact that Cohen was in on the trials, that tells you enough. And he got his degree in Germany during Nazi Germany.
Well, then they even credit Esalen with like easing the Cold War by their efforts in Russia. It's like, when you put that out there, you're almost just saying, you know, maybe, just maybe, the reason why we can do that is because we were already there, and that's where we pulled our programs from. It's like, yeah, that's because all your influencers did come from there. Everybody who was in psychology at that time, bringing it together, came from there and just moved them over here. And what I found interesting as well is, and it's never even discussed, it's like, why were we never told this? Like, all these people we think that are enemies, they all lived in Vienna, like within 10 miles of each other. All of them. And they all went to the same cafe. So don't tell me everybody was at war when they're all chit-chatting at the same cafe in Vienna and they just live down the street from each other.
Yeah.
Why is that not even talked about? You know, then I think people would question more of what this war was about to begin with, and why did we bring these people over here if they were directly involved with the same people that started the war? That would cause issue. It would just cause too much of a blame. But what I had ended up finding was, even with them all being involved in Vienna, like the Alan Watts, Huxley, Tillich, all of these people were involved with the same guy named his Adler, who was directly associated with and helped fund and get these groups together for Leon Trotsky. So that's really what popped in my head when that is what Aquina was talking about, is that it went back to Trotskyism, and Trotsky was Lenin's first guy. This is where this came from. It came directly from Russia, from them trying to overthrow Russia. So this is where Esalen's concepts are coming from. Everybody that was involved in the Trotskyism, the socialism, Nazis, all of it. It came directly from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with the concept of communism, how you have an elimination of a god and you have everything unified. They subscribe to the perennial philosophy, where there's like a common core found throughout all religions, and therefore you should adhere to those truths instead of anything else. And so to me, it sounds very communist-esque, which goes back to the point of, you know, originating from this Russian, you know, origin.
And we got to think too, the people that are influencing, that are in these larger podcast influencers, are coming from this Esalen mindset, mm-hmm. and are pushing the same philosophies, and even their products are coming from the designs that these people put in place. Like, oh, you know, if you use this and put this with that, it's going to get this result. They're preaching this stuff to you. So it's not like just because we know about it, we're free of it. No, if you follow Rogan, he's giving you the map of Esalen. If you're following fucking Aubrey Marcus, he's giving you the map from Esalen. They're not removed from it.
No.
They're just relabeled and rebranded. Same propaganda.
That was a great way to say it. Well said. Yeah. Just like all typical occultists that seem to get like very well known and get a cult following, they just rebrand somebody else's shit. It's like amazing.
Yeah, we're seeing that now. Like the whole Terrence Howard situation. He's just rebranding other people's concepts, but because he has a name attached to him, and then he goes on Rogan, all of a sudden, you know, his word is, you know, the word.
Right.
But it's going right back into the pockets of the people that you're supposedly, you know, pulling back the sheet on. Is going back to this Mellon family. And the Mellon family is very influential. That is a lot of money. Rockefeller's a lot of money. And everybody knows, you know, the Rockefeller, but I don't think people go too far into where all the Mellon family come from. And even Loeb, like, I'm not saying Avi Loeb's involved, but when you go back into who funded the Bolsheviks, one of those bankers was a Loeb, which was Russian Jewish oligarchs.
Yeah, but that kid, I don't know if it's true or not, but I mean, he does have the same last name, Christopher Loeb, who was associated with the Gilgo Beach stuff. He told me when he looked into his family, he said he does go back to like that stuff. He was telling me that there was like a Rabbi Loeb. He was like a Russian Jew, and he was like giving me all like this stuff, and I was like, damn. They were telling me all these things about supposedly that he's come across about his past. And I was like, that's some pretty fucking deep connections and weird shit right there. Not saying it's true, but I mean.
Well, even what I thought was funny, and I was like, this is just a rabbit hole I'm not going down, but you know, you can go down it if other people want. But the one guy, Adler, who, you know, was totally involved with Trotsky, and his wife was too, her last name was Epstein. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, I guess you could go back and be like, maybe let's go through some family lineage here, but it does seem like they know each other, even if they act like they don't. They're associated with somebody.
I think so. I don't think you get to a position to where you're creating a think tank like that and not be well connected and not know other people very well.
Right. And that's what I found with that Uranus group. I was just like, these are the same people, same concept. They just expanded over and helped get Esalen going. And I don't know if they're still operating today, but it's the same people that finance them that are financing Esalen as well. And Carl Jung is pretty much involved in that as well, because the foundation that the Mellons have, they named it Bollinger, and that is the name of Carl Jung's house. So he can't go back and be like, oh, I'm not involved. No, they wouldn't have named the foundation after your house if you weren't directly involved with these people.
Right.
Oh, you know what? One thing I want to mention real quick, too, that I read last night, and I think it's something I might have even have known and didn't think a thing about it in the past. Real quick, like even AA, originally the Rockefeller family wanted to give them like $50,000 to start like their own thing, profit though. And they were like, I think it was going to be too much of a hassle. And they're like, maybe the non-for-profit idea was better. And they were like, well, here, take this $5,000 anyway, just to help get on your feet. So I mean, even when you have these people like associated with funding these things to get started, you have to. You even think back then, $5,000 back then, that's probably enough to be in somebody's back pocket.
Yeah. Brandy, you bring up Carl Jung, and it's going back. He had this woman, Christiana Morgan, and she stayed with him for a time. And when you have the Balfour Declaration being written by a Zionist, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Christiana Morgan was seeing him or dating him. And then that relationship ends, and she moves on to Henry Murray. Henry Murray goes on to create MK Ultra, and she all came from Carl Jung, or basically, you know, was groomed by him. So they're hitting these people from all different avenues.
Well, like even Alan Watts in that Houseboat Summit, he brought in Ginsburg in there, and everybody knows he's a part of the whole pedo cult situation. Yeah. So these are the people you associate with. These are the people's quotes that you like to live your life by. It's true. You're indoctrinating yourself and even following them blindly like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have Terrence McKenna, who came in towards the end of it. I didn't get into that because I stopped at the foundation, but you even have him bringing in his thoughts of how there were too many males on the planet, and that maybe, you know, we need to kind of curb that situation. And then even saying that there's just too many people. He was even preaching the overpopulation because, you know, the mushrooms were talking to him and saying that, you know, the planet is overpopulated. So he was eugenics, genocide, preaching it, but you know, everybody who wants to start doing their mushroom trips will just praise this man without knowing what it is they're even jumping into to begin with. These are not people to model your life by. These are nobody's heroes. These are the people they set out to look all disco ball just to drop shit on you.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. They do have these Malthusian belief system that the world is overpopulated and we need to whittle it down to however many they believe deemable. Now, based on actual no empirical data whatsoever, but they've decided it so, and now everybody follows suit because mushrooms told them to.
Mushrooms told him to. That was the clockwork elves. And I will tell you, just like how you brought up earlier, how they went from the mind experiments over into the animals. And for John C. Lilly to be in animals, he was researching sound waves, frequency waves. He has the Lilly wave. Well, you have ELF waves. Well, what is the plural of an ELF? An elf. Elves. So when they say, oh, it was the elves, you mean the ELF waves that were coming into your head told you? The elves?
That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. That's actually a really good point. Wow. Interesting.
It's one of them ways they tell you, but they're not telling you. It's not an actual little gimpy man at the side of a creek coming out of a hobbit hole. No, it's these waves that we're having to be subjected to day in and day out.
It's
that
like
influence our behavior.
It's not some cool looking dude with long blonde hair shooting arrows in the forest. It's not that.
Probably. They have a variety. They're all inclusive.
I'm like thinking from like The Hobbit, right? Not The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. That's what they're
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting because like a lot of those ideas, I don't know about those specific names, but those type of archetypes do like kind of rebrand them. Well, they probably, I don't know. I'm sure they probably came first in occultism, but something like very close to that do exist and have their own places, depending on what type of like. If you get into, I guess, elemental magic, you know, you start dealing with things that kind of get into that area, and that's an interesting way to look at it now. Is that like an elf is actually
everything
like
you observe is physical, but you're interpreting a wave as a physical object. So it just depends on, I would say, even the person, how we are interpreting, because it's up to our interpretation, because nobody looks the same to everybody just because we are individually interpreting the waves as they flow through us, and them flowing through us affect the way they're coming from us. So in front of us and how we see it, we are adding an element of distortion by them coming through us and us observing it.
Yeah, definite filter through experiences. Yeah. That's, and you know, to your point about occultism, the perennial philosophy that they say Esalen's based on, Ficino and Della Mirandola kind of adhered to that perennial philosophy, and they wanted to integrate like Hermeticism with Greek and Christian thought, or even De Mirandola. He genuinely believed that you couldn't just achieve, you know, connection by only adhering to one tradition. You had to incorporate multiple traditions into this way of thinking.
See, that's even where I wonder if that was like, I mean, I understand, like, again, this has happened in the past before, but I do kind of feel like that's like a big selling point to like the OTO with certain styles of ceremonial magic. You know, it's again, are you just ripping off somebody else from 300 years ago?
Yeah. I think it leads into that singularity as well, because when you bring it all together and smash it all into one ritual or think tank, it becomes those singularities. You make it a singular object to focus on.
Well, I also even think, like, if this is me, the way I look at certain things now, I do think you can find a singularity, an underlying thing that most people don't see, in my opinion, amongst, like, you know, all these different traditions. And let's say, like, you know, how one angel will be this and the other things, you know, all those associations. I think you can start to see some underlying connection that I think is probably like the real deep truth that people just don't pick up.
Yeah, which is that whole thing about you, when you start off and you're like this neophyte, the best meditation you can do is just stare at a dot on the wall, because that dot is the thing.
You know, I think in order, I could be wrong, but I think the neophyte, or it could even just be the first, the actual, like, first degree to become like a member of the Astrum Argentum, you will have to sit in one position for an hour and not move. And that, believe it or not, that was actually something I was never going to try to get into the AA, just from the simple tests that you had to take and the amount of books you had to read. I was like, fuck that, sorry. No, I'm not doing it. There were certain things that I knew that was like practices or whatever that I was like, oh, maybe I could still just use these for myself. And like, you'd sit in like one position, and they even suggest, I think, like 4 of them to use. One of them, pick one of these 4, and they will eventually expect you to. I've seen people say, I've never seen it myself, but like back in the day, I don't know if they still do it now. They would actually even put like a saucer on your head, and then if it moved,
oh, so you would.
Yeah, that they knew that you moved. Like, that's how crazy they were about making sure you actually didn't move for an hour. And they said the thing is, too, is that, like, this may sound weird, and I don't know if it's so much, a lot of times they'll call it levitation. I don't think it's so much levitation. I think, I have wondered myself if you almost start to seize out when you have a magical experience. So I'm wondering, like, even if you're holding yourself that long, and if, like, within an hour, if you know what you're doing, I would think within an hour you should be able to fucking accomplish going somewhere else. So it's like, is that even harder to where you have to make sure you're just like sitting on the edge for a fucking hour? Because then are you going to move or start twitching when you start fucking going out there in your own mind?
Well, even a psychosis or a psychotic state would cause that, like the convulsing or seizing. Yeah. So that could even bring.
And the weird thing about that is that, like, again, like I say, I do think a lot of magic goes back to like electricity and like fucking around with your eyes and your brain. I mean, and if your body starts convulsing, that's due to electricity fucking shooting through your body.
Overload, yeah.
Maybe what's in your eyes, you're pushing it back into your head. It's got to go somewhere else.
Goes without saying, they were mapping the brain. I mean, they weren't focusing on anything else but the brain during these, trying to get these people to achieve a mystical experience.
Well, they even have these programs now. They have them now, but I'm guaranteeing they were already on that level of when they can map your brain, they will also try to map that astral realm that you communicate with, so that they could try to map that area as well, where you are unconsciously. But that also goes back into the waves, because when you are unconscious and you're asleep, what you hear or feel can dictate where it is you go in your mind. So they can just map that unconscious brain state with the waves that they send out, which does make it easier to put commercials in your dreams.
Again, back to the suggestive.
Which may be why we're seeing the push for lithium everywhere. Like, we have to dig all this lithium up. We want you to sit on top of this lithium battery all day, every day.
You know what I find even interesting with stuff like that, and I think Lisa could probably, let us know to deal with it. Isn't a lot of meds like that, aren't they all like a derivative of salt?
Yes. They put salt in it to balance it, or to make it stable, is what it was explained to me. I don't know that is absolute truth, but from what I understood is that most salts are added to a chemical to make them stable, so that when it hits your stomach, it doesn't completely you vaporize, and then, what's the point of taking it? It actually buffers the acidity of the stomach itself.
See, that's even something that made me wonder about, like, how I talk about the OTO degrees. Not to get into them, but I do think, like, in my opinion, you're going the wrong way right off of the first one, Minerval. You completely just, like, you're heading in the wrong direction. And I do think, like, it's symbolizing the eye and the brain. A lot of that's going on in there. And I think, like, more than likely, like, the light's, like, shining out into this existence. You're heading the hoods that way. And there is a point where you will, like, be given bread, salt, and olive oil. You know, I always did think, like, the salt had something to do, like, with grounding or, like, even some sort of science. Because I do think there's actual science in these degrees as well. Yes. You know, and I have actually wondered if that is part of it, too. And it's just, salt, even with, meds like that. Mm-hmm. It's just very, very much of this world, I guess.
It definitely is a grounding thing, I think, and then just a stabilization, just in and of itself. Salt, just the stability of salt in the ocean itself kind of buffers from all these pH fluctuations. It's a stabilizing agent. It stabilizes the situation. So grounding, that's pretty much what you do with electricity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would also involve our body as well, because we are salt.
Yes. Yes.
So if our salts are not balanced, we're going to experience certain conditions.
Correct. That also, I think, probably helps with the conductive of electricity through your body.
It does. Well, I think now they're actually trying to come out and admit the whole sugar situation. It was like, don't blame sugar for what salt is doing to your body. So if you're not eating the correct, and it's not the table salt, if you're not having the correct salt levels in your body, is creating that so-called disease. And then they're giving you this medication that has different salts in it, and then you're having to take medications for the side effects that those medications are giving you.
Yeah, electrolytes are, basically what's in salt, just separated, not combined. But
it's got what plants need.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that I just watched that recently. Oh my God.
Oh, there was a question I had by PK. Do you guys have, like, any, what do you all think about Esalen now? I mean, I guess without getting too far off of where we were going. Just real quick, I wanted to ask that.
I think it's still to me, it's still the same, because they're just bringing in other, like MAPS. MAPS is directly involved with Esalen. MAPS is no different. MAPS is just another offshoot of the same funding family.
I think it's also now, I think it's gotten better. You know what really sucks is that, like, this has just been my experience. I did want to kind of, like, look into a lot of their stuff prior to this, and, like, there really isn't, like, there's tons of it by them on YouTube. But, I did not find, like, one person covering that in a negative sense.
No.
And but it was just, like, the new stuff that they have now, I'm like, they got really good at making it, like, I think, appealing to, like, the happy hippie people.
Yeah, it's like
it's gone from, like, one cult look to a
different
different one that I think it's a little bit more acceptable.
Yeah.
I did notice that. I was like, they definitely have changed, I think, their look for the better.
Oh, yes. When they had to.
Like, more appealing for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you have $8,000 for 5 days, then go at it. Go ahead. Try it out.
I think it's a think tank at its core. It's in terms of a think tank, that it is more of a private contract versus like DARPA, which is actual, government, entity itself. You have a lot of influencing on social culture coming out of Esalen. So it is a think tank at its very core. And you have people who are what you call influencers on social media that do influence social culture, that go to Esalen, are recruited by them, participate in lectures, basically give curriculum studies or what have you, and even came out of the institute. So to say that, that it's benign, I think is somewhat naive. I think that if you look at the way society is going, most of it is because of influencers. Where are those influencers coming? From institutes like this, from think tanks like this. And when you look at the basis like perennial philosophy, and you look at evolutionary spirituality of Esalen, you see how they are trying to mold that view outward. Now, can that be towards, making money? Can you predict how the stock market's going to go because these influencers are going to promote that? Maybe that's what that's for. And this is how they make money, on the side from it as well. It's an all-encompassing think tank. But that's what I think it is. I think it's a think tank outside of the government entity, but still very much inside.
And they put it together on a whole movement. They called it a human potential movement. So what they were going, or what their purpose was to bring these programs together in order to have people take these programs, learn their lifestyle, go out, and then influence that on others to awaken their human potential. And the movement it would go from that idea coming from one person to the next, then they would influence the next person that they see. So it was a push to get this influence out to affect other people who may not too much agree with their lifestyle choices. Yeah. It was part of their so-called counterculture, which now is not so much, it was counterculture then. Now it's becoming our culture. Like, they have successfully morphed it into this being our culture. The counterculture now is for us to be pulling away from these studies, and they have it with a negative connotation, because now, in order to be that counterculture, you would be pulling away from spirituality. So I think they kind of set it up like, who would do that? Why would you do such a thing, to pull away from your spirituality? But it's a false spirituality that they've created for you to attach yourself to. This higher enlightenment is something they've manufactured, because nobody's enlightenment looks like anyone else's, and your steps there are not going to be like anyone else's, because you have to find your own path as that individual. You cannot take one drug and experience the same thing that everybody else does unless the government has created that drug. It is your own experience and your own interpretation, and you have to find your own way, and you have to be your own savior. That is the point. It's not groupthink.
You know what I think is, it's almost like the same thing in a sense, the way I want to explain this. Like, I feel like, a lot of people I think would probably go to things like this or cults, in a sense, because like you're probably against, like, the establishment that the religion, and all that organized stuff. And I really don't see much of a difference where, like, you're going to, let's say, like, you're a Christian or a Catholic, and like you're fucking done with that, blah blah blah, fucking hung around for a while, just trying to find something that stuck with you, and then you heard about Esalen, and you go there, or you heard about some other cult that was like maybe a little bit more like kind of religious, or not religious but spiritual. You're going to go there, and odds are they're actually going to be just still handing you now their God or their fucking thing. It's still got its own hierarchy or whatever that person designed. The only difference is, like, your parents didn't tell you about, Jesus Christ. You found this on your own, so you think that there's freedom in this. It's like, no, you just found another fucking, bullshit thing on your own to believe now. I mean, how you're leaving one thing with structure and moving into somebody else's structure. It just gives you a little bit more freedom than another religion does. But you're still stuck going by somebody else's beliefs that they're handing down to you.
And that's why I think it's good that even though we're identifying certain topics that we pretty much can identify as a cult, I think it's good for everybody to familiarize themselves with what a cult is and how it's set up and what the characteristics of it is, because a lot of what we are going through right now, and especially in podcasting communities, are cults.
That in politics, I think, is the worst right now.
It's a cult.
And they go hand in hand.
This leader, it's a cult.
Yeah, and that's one thing that sucks, and it's like one thing that I do try to stay away from, you know, unless it's like it's just across the board. I mean, even with politics, I feel like that since podcasting is like, conspiracy theorists are getting so much with politics now and picking a side, it's like fucking it all up. It's fucking it all up. To where it's like you don't even know if it's ignorance or a fucking, you know, incel. You know, or like, so, you know, Inception. You know, somebody coming in and fucking shit up. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn. I don't know. It just, I think that's a problem. You know, because it is very cult-minded when it comes to politics. So that brings the cult hive mind into people who used to be skeptical of everything.
You can replace these political figures, though, with these, the alien or the Bigfoot or whatever else. It's the same thing. It's the same concept.
Well, that's even like, it's certain topics people will die on that hill for.
Yeah. And that's what we're pretty much seeing. It's just like, okay, you're part of, you like the UFOs, you like the whole giants and Sasquatch, and you also follow Trump. So you're like part of 5 different cults. Because you're going to certain specific leaders to tell you how to think on those subjects.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this like a few days ago, and I was like, I couldn't even imagine being like a huge Trump fan right now. I was like, you know how much fucking space in my head that would be taking up? Because like, I'm just gonna, you know, I don't know if they have podcasts, but there's like content creators on Instagram that I follow, even though they're still political. I'm cool with the person. I talk to him sometimes. So whatever, it's not for me. I just pass. But like sometimes I look at this shit and I'm just like, yo, like you seem like, you know, they're very passionate. And you'll hear like these long-winded ideas and theories to justify what they want the outcome to be. And I'm like, you know how much time you're spending in your head before you even put this out on Trump? Yeah. I was like, yo, that's like prison. I was like, I'd want to think about other things than him throughout the day. That's serious. You know, I was like, you know, I guess it sucks to be like, you know, you're grateful because you're seeing somebody else. I guess, you know, being someone you're glad you're not. But, you know, it does like even make you kind of like, fuck, thank God. Like I only got caught up in that for a few months. Because that really does rent a lot of space in your head. I mean, and then like, I just feel like even when you get into that, like you go outside and you're more worried about people's fucking political ideology. People don't go places because, there's too many libtards there. Holy fuck. That shit will really start to run your life and your decisions.
And then absorbing the material. So just in case you get questioned, you are, you know, an advocate for your political party, that you parrot the perfect phrase that Fox News or CNN told you to parrot. You know what I mean? The amount of energy and absorption that consumes the brain just for political football teams. It's weird.
I remember there was a kid that I knew from the OTO that like first told me about QAnon because he thought it was like something was weird or off about it. And like when I first came across it, I think I kind of like, I like remembered him and went back to him and fuck, I forgot where I was going with this. Fuck. Oh well, forget about it. Fuck. I don't know how the fuck that just happened. I lost it real quick. Sorry.
Q? You as in Q? Or
it had something to do with Q and a cultish shit, but I just totally forgot. I don't know. All right, go ahead. My bad.
Well, no, just that in itself will drive people to their hive, though, because you have to be with people who think just like you, or else you can't communicate with that next hive beside of you because the vibe is off.
Yo, right?
Yeah. So it's a great way to pigeonhole groups. I mean, it makes it easy. You make yourself more easily identifiable. So when they roll out propagandas, they know who it is that they're grabbing with the phrases that they're using because they can just pull it from where we're already at.
That's what it was. The phrases. I like had to go back to him because like when I first started kind of like paying attention at Q, I was like, I don't even understand half these fucking things, and most of it was like political. Like, as silly as it was, I didn't know what the fuck SCOTUS was. I had to ask him. He's like, that's, you know, he explained it to me. I was like, oh, well, okay.
I'm
like,
no
I'm dumb.
difference.
But then there's people typing that out and like fucking getting off on it because they feel important that just like me, 2 days ago, you actually first saw that. And now you put that with your WW where we go when we, you know, all that to make it look like you're an educated fucking internet person now.
And that's back to the whole bliss out and drop out. It's like, oh, the white hats got it. Who named that? And why the fuck do they have anything? And you you're just believing in this fantasy that it's being taken care of all by itself. And that's no different than the 60s counterculture movement of just get fucked up and drop out. Don't worry, it's going to take care of itself. Well, I don't think so. If you're not involved in taking care of the things that you need to be taken care of, somebody else is going to take care of it for you, and they're not going to consult you on it. So this is where we're at. So everybody with the whole Q situation, or you just believing so wholeheartedly in some one concept that you can't move from, then that you have let that dictate your outcomes, your thoughts, and it's also hindered who it is that you can communicate with that may give you a better sense of direction in your own self path. You've limited yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say now, let's flip the script. Because I saw Kelly Norris said something in the chat. And I'm not saying that I'm not like arguing. I think she might actually just be making a point too. And I think it's very important. Now you have people on the opposite side that are renting a fuck ton of space in their head over a guy they hate.
Oh my God, there is a whole thing with that though.
Yeah.
But that is,
I'm sorry, they're both as bad. They're both as bad.
It's like the football concept. They study their opponent before they do the game because you need to know what their moves are. And that's exactly what they do. Yeah. But that's also the same way with the CIA and every letter agency. You have counter intel, and that's what they do. They are specifically chosen to study the counter part of it so that they can formulate how to maneuver.
With the amount of think tanks exist, the amount of intelligence ops that we know of that have happened, and to not think that what's happening with the political system is not an op, it's a little naive at this point. It really is. I think
even people hire these people in their own staff. Like, they need somebody to run pushback so that it boosts their following. It boosts their reliability in the minds of the people who are watching. It's like, no, I need you to come in and like throw opposing things at me so that I can, get in this make-believe argument with you so that we can now post this, and they're thinking we're beefing and it's just going to blow us both up. So let's do this.
And I do think that the cults, and like even especially with Synanon, I genuinely feel that these cults are manufactured out of Southern California because they all come out of Southern California. I do think that they're manufactured for the sake of finding out what would happen if. What would happen if we put this person in charge? What would happen if we put these ideologies to these types of people? What would happen? And then they collect their data. They see the same hive mind mentality, and now they have a whole new collection of psychological data, and now they can run their op.
That everybody followed, and even the people who didn't question, maybe they had an inkling, but they didn't bring it up. The people who did question it, they brought it up amongst themselves, but didn't do anything about it. Because Synanon will tell it. That is a perfect example of let's see what if, because you have him coming in, and they just fell in love with what he was talking about, just his talking style. I don't even think they may have been listening to it all, but they were just, he's so charismatic. So they followed. And you had like Leary came in just to study the way he influenced people. And that's bad enough. He came in to study this guy on his influence and his reach. And you have a guy who came in saying, okay, I'm dry, we're going to get everybody else dry, who was drinking damn near all the time, had a whole class system. And then after he got them so invested and in place in these different communities, he went to say, okay, now we need to put children into their own facility and away from your parents. we need to get them away from their parents because you're going to show favoritism, and we want this as a community, so you can't show favoritism. Let's remove the kids. So after he removed the kids and everybody went along with it, it was easy enough for him to turn back around and say, okay, well, now we need to swap partners because you're going to become you're going to show favoritism towards these partners, and they're going to affect the way that you have judgments and how you do your daily work, because these people were pretty much working. Mm-hmm. Then after that was okay, he was like, okay, so now we're all going to get sterilized. And they fucking did it. They fucking did it.
Yeah.
Yo,
along with shaving their head and wearing
Yes.
overalls.
And it happened in just a matter of what, not even 20 years. He had compounds, cults, weaponized them up, and they were ready to go.
Yeah. And, you know, you think, okay, well, this guy, he was charismatic, you know, people, you know, were drawn to him. But then you look at the year, because it was Synanon started in 58, right? 1958. The year before, in August, Dietrich, is that how you pronounce his last name? I can't remember. How you pronounce it.
Dietrich, yeah.
He was in the study with Keith and Cohen back at UCLA, and they were the ones that gave him LSD for the first time, and he was in their trials. And those trials were CIA funded, and they were happening right alongside the Harvard trials when Ted Kaczynski was going through it. Or I don't know if it was Ted Kaczynski's trials, but Henry Murray was conducting those trials in Harvard at the same time that Keith and Cohen were running their trials over in California. And they were all CIA funded. I don't care how you slice it. They applied for the grant, they got the money, and they were running it. And again, you have Keith Dietrich in this trial, and the next year he's now all of a sudden creating Synanon when he couldn't even pass a class in college.
Exactly.
Come on.
And even further than that, with him dropping out of Notre Dame, and they have him working at like I said, the Gulf refinery, and the Gulf refinery at that time was owned by the Mellon family.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's like it's all the same people, all the same scheme, the same directory.
And then, so if you say, okay, well, maybe that's coincidental, right? Maybe that was just a one and done thing. But then you see the activity of Synanon and how it changes direction. And you mentioned this when Abraham Maslow comes on board, it completely changes. And what did we talk about Abraham Maslow? Abraham Maslow was part of what? HPM.
Conditioning.
Yes. So it's almost like maybe Dietrich was getting off the rails. They're like, we got to send in the reinforcements, send in Abraham, you know, and all of a sudden it takes redirection. And one of the, I forget whose student he was, but Stephen Simon is also there with Maslow. And there towards the end, I believe Stephen Simon gives the order to burn all the records at Synanon of everything that was happening, or files or whatever that was there, which is no different than what the CIA director, I believe it was in 59, I'm not sure, but it was around, no, it was in 75. It was Richard Helms. He was the CIA director for the MK Ultra, and he had all the MK Ultra files destroyed in 1973. So it's very similar to what Simon did.
Right, which isn't any different than them burning books. Burn the information. Get rid of it.
Yep. Or destroying cell phones and iPads. Just kidding.
Exactly. And it all goes back through the whole, Russian, German. And when I look at it, it's like it's no different. If you really search it back, it goes all back to that era and to this 1900s split where we had a whole society that was running, and then the 1900s come, and the next thing you know, everything's rubble and we're having to rebuild.
Right. Yep. But to say Synanon was not, and it was one of the most violent cults, but to say that it was not attached in some way to the Alphabet Boys, I think is a little naive. to make that assumption.
Or even them having access to so much celebrity endorsement kind of lends to that. When you see that, when they're like, okay, we're losing people, start bringing in the celebrities because they're going to influence people more. And that was the same way with the CD that came out of Synanon. These celebrities were sending their kids to these brainwash camps, letting them be influenced and letting them go through the trauma so that now they're easily malleable and influenced by the same conditioning that the parents before them were introduced to. And at Synanon, they made it like it they even took it from being a treatment. They were like, no, now this is the trendy thing to do. This is its own thing now. It's taken itself over. And that was the movement then, just like it's the movement now to get out of this traditional thing and go a different way, but they still need to control the way it is that we're interpreting this movement. So yeah, we're being pushed again back to the psychedelic movement, but now it's new and improved and synthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They've gotten their grip really tightly around it. Now they can make money off of it. That's the only reason it wasn't available before. They just couldn't make money off of it yet.
Well, I think that they needed that time to do all those trials before they decided this is the time we're going to legalize it. And we've got these chemicals pretty much set in place that we know how to roll it out. Mm-hmm. And these people are going to open arms it because in this community, they're so anti-establishment that they're going to latch back onto it again.
Right. Right. Yep. I would agree with that.
And that's what I never understood too, is like some of how we're seeing the trans movement and stuff like that. How much of a mind fuck is that, where it's being brought out of the same system that made that gender dysmorphia a mental illness in itself? But now you're promoting it like it's not a mental illness, even though it's still listed as a mental illness.
And almost, again, adheres to what LSD says, suggestive and detachment of what your value system was prior.
Yeah. And if you go back and even read through the rats of NIM studies, they will show you that when they put this rat city together and they made it easy for the rats to get everything they wanted, they didn't have to go anywhere. They seen a significant rise in homosexuality and just not even caring as far as gender goes, who they chose to mate with. And it wasn't like they just chose them to mate with like it was an out of a natural response. No, they violently and viciously were like, it was pretty much like mice rape. Like they were violently and viciously over sexualized and did not care who it was that gender wise, who they were having sex with. So we see that right now. They want 15-minute cities. Well, that would create a rats of NIM simulation real quick.
Very much so. Very much so. Which goes against what the teachings were, in terms of, and I've heard Nick's talk about this a little bit, how some of these mystical experiences allow you to see your connection to nature, allowed you to see the connection of how you exist within this realm, so to speak, and then potentially the next realm over. You place people in 15-minute cities, you completely detach them from all of that.
Yep. There is no more nature. You don't need to go anywhere. And I that would even involve the whole electricity, bring in the lithium batteries, have you sitting in a microwave. Well, you don't have to go very far, because where are you going to go very far on a battery? Not too far.
Right. Right. That's exactly right.
You're always going to be plugged in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah. I thought about that. Those cars. I mean, there's only so much distance. I mean, you can recharge, but still.
It's another control level.
I think so too.
Yep. Lithium isn't even the most efficient at batteries holding charge anyway.
No.
So why the lithium?
Oh, you know, something I wanted to ask to kind of like, I guess, get back into a Dietrich, actually. Because you two would probably know better than me. I do know that, like, eventually somehow they justify drinking. I think in Esalen. Synanon, right?
Synanon.
Yeah.
They did.
And like that ruined him. He ended up basically turned into like an alcoholic.
They went to Italy. They escaped to Italy, and they was like, "Oh well, while we're here, no rules, no rules." But I think too that does go back to like how you said the OTO was headed in the wrong direction, because in antinomianism, you can do the worst of things or you can do the best of things, and those two things will lead you to the same ending. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It would still bring some type of enlightenment.
Yeah, but like I do know eventually that guy became like a total mess. I mean, I think he even started like ranting and raving. Like, I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't think you did. But like, I think they even had, well, I know they had, I think it was all of them though, within like, I think all of their places, which was a lot. They had a lot of places throughout the United States. They had an intercom system that was in all of them that came from the place he was at. So, like, if he decided he wanted to get on and start rambling some shit, he did. And, like, this guy started going on and doing
psychosis.
Yeah.
Where he was not making any sense whatsoever. And so this entire time, these people were following direction and living their lives by a person who was insane. Basically, he was just using the drugs, and then he went from the drugs to his control over these people to maintain his mental illness.
Wasn't he diagnosed as manic depressive by the end of it?
Yeah. Yep.
I wonder if he had already exhibited those characteristics at the beginning, and they kind of, furthered that along with the trials.
Right. Yeah. Just to see how much he could take before he actually broke. But the thing is they had a great experiment running because nobody's seen. And if they did see, they didn't question because they didn't want to be thrown out of their community. So they would rather endure the problems they had and be subjected to torture than to leave the community. So that was one of the things that they kept saying, is that the torture that the members were going through, and yet they still wouldn't leave. Yeah, because he even did, towards the end, it was like, okay, now we're going to move on to health. So everybody had to like be naked and weigh in.
Talk about ruining your day.
Right?
Like, you see that? I have a picture on the thumbnail where it's like a bunch of dudes standing in underwear online outside.
Like, this is just, I can't. I'm not going to stand naked in front of everybody on a scale and you just looking at me like I didn't do my part and now we're all fucked because I gained a pound.
Yo, did you see like they did like choreographed like leg movements and stuff to be like exercising as they're like moving around? It was disturbing. I was like, I guess like I understand how like, well, first off, those things are old. So, I mean, you probably didn't even really have all the devices around to like suck up your attention. So you probably would have had time to learn something like that if you're interested with a bunch of people that are like-minded. But it was just like, yo, that shit is like on fucking point. And like these people, like they're doing all this stuff out in this field and it's just, whoa. Like that is dedication.
No, well, it's kind of like marching with your group.
Yeah. I was like, I couldn't even imagine training to like get that down like that. I was like, that has to be something that you're like, oh, this is actually fun and I want to try to do this. You know what I'm saying?
No.
It didn't look like they were having fun, but they even did it to the kids too, though. Like they would put the kids in the same situations because they really didn't have they had school, but not like a actual structured school. But then they were like, okay, let's have the kids participate in this attack treatment as well. So they would attack each other and put each other through this trauma, and they would drill each other down. So they didn't separate their mentality. They just separated old from young, but they are all on the same track.
Well, speaking of kids, wasn't there like people that were recovering at the beginning of Synanon? They were like recovering people, and that they would use the kids to bring in and out the buckets where they would throw up in or whatever, so that the kids were actually seeing the people go through their withdrawal periods and what have you. And so they're front and center watching the whole thing unfold. There was no at the beginning, I believe that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in the beginning, because that's what they had were addicts. But after they went through that, they were like, well, we need people who knew how to run a business, because they were getting money, they were getting profit. And that's where they had to go into calling it a religion, because otherwise they were having to pay so much in these taxes. And because they were getting so much in donation, they had to bring these business people in. So then you started having people who didn't even have an addiction. They were just coming in to join the commune, to join the cult, just to be there because they either had a specialty or they just wanted to be part of that culture. And even with the kids, they shaved their heads too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was only one Kool-Aid packet away from a Jim Jones. That was it.
One solo cup, red solo cup.
That's it.
I know once they started to, like, didn't they even start like changing like the diet, like the menu and like that whole health thing? Didn't that actually get people started kind of leaving then, right?
Wasn't it with the cigarettes though?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That was like, you can't smoke no more.
Yeah, because he had gone to the doctor or whatever, and the doctor told him the cigarettes were the ones causing his heart problems or something. So he comes back and says, no more cigarettes. And then people actually freaked out and like were leaving. Right? Is that, I think that was what I read.
They started saying like, hey, every time something happens to him, he comes back and he's like, hey, y'all got to do it too. So therefore, you can't smoke no more. And that was so bad because it didn't even cause all of them to leave at that point. It was just the people were like, wait a minute, no, I don't want to. It wasn't even enough people. They were still heavily influenced by this man. And that is dangerous.
Yeah. That's true.
And I think that's what we, like, I hate to see the extreme, but I do see some of the extreme of people who are really, I mean, you do have people that follow Trump to that weird ass extreme, but you also have people that follow Biden to this weird ass extreme. Yeah. Like they are just willing to be like, oh, I'm laying it all out. I think,
the reason why, sometimes I do tend to, kind of shit on the right more often than the left. It's because it's just my opinion. It's like, well, first of all, I think it's more obvious with the left, but the right is like, so like, well, we're so not like that, but it's like, yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
You just bought a different version of freedom than they're buying.
Exactly. And that's why it was like no different between Esalen and Synanon. Like it's not different. It is the same. It's the same spectrum, just different ends of it. Y'all are all doing the same thing. Period. You just may have a different addiction, but the people that are going to Esalen don't even really have an addiction. They're just going there because they want to experience what they're being influenced to experience, not knowing that the people who are doing the influencing aren't paying to stay there. They aren't paying for the treatment. They're being comped all this stuff just to regurgitate it and participate in the program for that matter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that is. Yeah, like think about that too. Like I've even heard about that with like TCs like Phoenix House and Apple. There'll be people who like kind of like eventually get to like live there and get perks, and like your time is done, but like now you're kind of like getting paid to an extent, and like at that point, like those people like basically like they're under that place's thumb, and they're just like you're just like a hired hand to control the place. It's just very weird if you think about it. And the sad thing is that like, because of the life that they had prior and it was so shitty, they still think that, like, this is a better fucking situation, or, you know, this is a better outcome than, I guess, than what I had. They're totally being used and manipulated. You know, it's sad.
I mean, they had the two same doctors, Esalen and Synanon. They are being manipulated. They're 100% both being manipulated.
Yeah, I remember, like, hearing stories about that because I'd never been to those places. And I was like, you're kind of just like a hired security guard. To keep the people in order. I was like, damn, well, a corrections officer, really.
Yeah. And he did, Chuck Dietrich, he did form a small militia within there.
He did, that's right.
Yes, he did, that's right.
He freaking did.
Yeah, they started.
It went from no violence to shoot anybody who fucks with us.
Yeah, I think he even said the only reason I own a gun is to kill somebody with it.
Yeah, he did.
Didn't he start the Imperial Marines as well?
In there, yeah.
That if anybody disagreed with them outside of the group, they'd have them knocked off, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then they damn near killed the one lawyer by putting that rattlesnake in his mailbox. But they went as far as to cut the rattle off the rattlesnake so that there was no warning. Like, that is some evil shit. And you're not rationally, logically going to do, like, you're there for a drug problem. How the fuck do you go being there for a drug problem to now you're going to kill some lawyer because they're going against your association? Like, that is some mental fuckery. And that's why I think the Manson situation, if they had let it draw out some more, I think we would have seen him come up with this same type of setup. Like, he would have had his same type of, Manson may have been the Charles Dietrich beta run.
I think so. And I think once they were done with him, that's when they sent Keith out to finish the job and basically get him, if he got indicted, if he was in prison, because we talked about that yesterday on the show, if he even did time or whatever, Manson. But I think they were done with Manson, and that's why they sent Keith in there to basically, you know, close off that case with that whole thing. But I agree with you. I think Manson was a beta run for the cults to come, especially this one.
You know, and even I could see a little bit of a correlation in a sense. Like, one thing that I thought was interesting with Synanon, and I do think, like, it's even, like, known at one point they were almost struggling to even keep their like tax breaks because there was so many people that weren't even addicts anymore that were paying to go there, that they were like, shit, like, are we even giving enough treatment? I think, like, they might have even started doing some fugazi shit that they were considering, like, as treatment, like, even though I don't know, but I know, like, they started trying to figure out ways to deal with that and get around that. But, like, if you think about it, you took something like, I think, like, occultism, especially with Manson and those cults, people, like, in the industry with money were attracted or were involved with that type of stuff. And with Synanon, it's like you kind of see, like, we took in people that were, like, again, I guess, so willing to try something out. They were so desperately looking for something, and they were easy to pick off. And now we've gotten it to the point to where now we can actually sell this. Like, you can see, like, a pretty incredible progression in that sense in the time that they were open.
Lucrative progression.
So
and they gave him the loopholes.
You had a long time to be able to tweak that to get it as good as it probably got to make money. You know, you had some years to actually kind of, like, make that happen. When he set
it up, there was no treatments. So they couldn't even define what a treatment would be. So he was allowed to call whatever he wanted a treatment. But now states fund this shit. This stuff is state funded now for you to be like, okay, well, this is what we define as a treatment. So he had all the loopholes in the world to create what he deemed as treatment.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing that set it off, is when they were like, wait a minute, we've got people that normally have great fucking jobs out here on the outside living in your camps, and you've got like 30 different properties with horses and shit. Where's the people that where's the drug addicts at? Nobody looks like a drug addict.
You know what I found interesting is that when they were kicking them out of that place out of Santa Monica, that one of the people that came to his rescue was Jane Fonda. And we mentioned how Jane Fonda, Peter Fonda, was part of the whole Laurel Canyon thing. So it goes right back to the whole, manipulation all over again. But she, apparently her and another guy, I can't remember his name, another actor, basically helped finance or help financially get them, in a better situation than being kicked out.
Something I wanted to ask you both, if you happen to know, how much it costed eventually. Like, I know Esalen now, there's like a charge to go. Didn't you say something about like $8,000 or something?
$8,000, yeah. If you want your own space, it's $3,000 if you want to sleep in a sleeping bag out on the lawn.
Wow. All right. Like, and then like, did Synanon start getting expensive? You think?
Well, didn't they earn like $17 million, and that's why they had to close? Because when they stripped their 501c away, that's how much they owed in taxes. Yeah.
And, all right. Because like, even with that, this just shows you like sometimes I think like just being like a hypocrite and not even realizing it sometimes. Like these places, in my opinion, would be rather expensive to go to. And in my opinion, they actually, if there's people there that are paying to go there now at this point that have any sort of political ideology, I'm assuming they're going to be much more on the left. That type of person. I'm just guessing. And there probably will be. You know what I'm saying? They'll probably just by, I guess just by percentages. You probably will get some people that have political ideas that, go to places like that. It's not cheap, so like I find it to be like contradicting yourself. Like when you get like rich as fuck left, extreme left people, it's like you're actually just a capitalist, and you just, you want everybody else to just fucking do what you want. Like it's just like how do you justify paying $8,000 or $3,000 to sit on a lawn, but then like think that socialism and communism is a good idea? How does that make sense to you?
It doesn't, but they rationalize it away because they think that they're doing something enlightening for themselves, or that they're going to gain something out of it.
Even at like a spiritual angle, how do you even justify like, you want to talk shit about them passing around a plate in the fucking church, but now $3,000 to go sit on a lawn's okay?
And weren't people like donating properties? Or like they were asking for people to donate their properties over as, I don't know, is like a membership condition or something?
Which is even easier for these people to do when you have these celebrities coming in to endorse it, saying that they went through the program and it's helped them. So, it's going to help you too.
Right.
And you get that with all of them. You still are getting that right now. These celebrities coming out saying, oh, well, I've got Lyme disease and I have to go through all this stuff. And it's like, how many celebrities have we came across with Lyme disease over the past couple of years now? Like all of them fucking got it. All of them got Lyme disease now. Like for what? What's the angle here? What are we trying to move towards? So when you've got these celebrities all joining in on this thing, there's something to be sold and somebody's making money.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Oh, because you know what? And I was even thinking, I just seen this with that movie Pass or whatever. They brought it up in there about using celebrities to sell a product, which normally people wouldn't give a second look at, and that the celebrity themselves have no clue of, is when they brought Rodman in to sell the movie pass situation, and they took him to Coachella because people more likely are doing psychedelics there to be suggestible. So they brought the celebrity and an influencer in to promote that product, at a place where psychedelics were going to be provided to get these people sold on that movie pass, even though the influencer and Rodman did not really understand or know what the product was that was being sold.
Wow.
It's no different. I mean, they're shipping these people from Esalen to Coachella every fucking year.
Yeah, they are.
And Synanon doesn't really look too far off from what Coachella looks like.
No.
You got a bunch of people being influenced by somebody on a stage out in the field. You know, the only difference is they get psychedelics. Synanon was like, no, you shouldn't do drugs. But it didn't even matter, which I think would have been part of the experimentation too, because Synanon, they were supposed to be off of drugs. And look, they were still totally under suggestion.
Yep. Sure.
Good experiment. Wow.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Was there anything else either one of you had still? Not that I'm not even saying we have to stop. I'm just getting an idea. To know how long this might be. Because if not, we can wrap it up now. If you do, you can keep going. Go for another 15, 20 minutes. No?
I don't.
No, I just that revelation.
Just that, you know, that when you see the parallelism of the, and I know I've already said this, but just to kind of drive home that point, but when you see these experiments happening with what's his name, Keith and Sydney, I keep referring to their first name, I apologize, but Cohen and I forget the other guy's last name. You see those experiments happening. You see the actual Harvard experiments happening. You see that MK Ultra is happening at the same time. Then you see coming in to Harvard is Richard Alpert from Stanford University and Timothy Leary from Berkeley University into Harvard. And they are the ones that initiate and basically kick off the Harvard psilocybin project. So if you want to know where it kind of all comes from, it kind of, and what's his name? Timothy Leary was working under Henry Murray and was in the same department. So you see how it all kind of, you know, from a reductionist standpoint, it's all coming down to a head into that one area. You can trace it all the way back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Aubrey Barkus in Coachella?
I'm sure he's been.
That's where he got married, wasn't it?
I think
know.
so.
Oh, it was a Burning Man, some shit like that. I think. I know. I think he's been involved with Burning Man, but I did wonder if he's been involved with Coachella, or if he's gone there. Whatever. Yeah, I have to look into that. You know, because when you say Coachella, I did think about Aubrey Barkus. Well, thank you both very much for coming on. That was a lot of stuff, I think, in 2 hours. I even think, Synanon itself, or Esalen alone, I think if you really wanted to do justice, would probably be like multiple episodes, in my opinion. So I think we got a lot in there, actually. And there's plenty more if people are actually interested looking into that stuff. If you have the patience, there's definitely a lot out there. And actually, a good way to segue into this promotion for Brandy. There is a lot of stuff on the Occult Research Institute on this topic. Slides, probably. There's things up there that she probably put up that was not shown here, obviously, because I didn't show anything. But there was an extensive, and I've been saying it's just pretty extensive, detailed work that is makes sense and it does flow. So if you have the time, you can also go on Occult Research Institute. I think it's under mental manipulation, I would assume. Yeah. And Brandy's section, and she has a lot, probably more stuff than you've even covered on this show. So go check it out. Really, really good work, and it's impressive. And thank you for putting it on the site.
Oh, you're welcome. I make sure to put every link involved. Even if I just read it and didn't include it, I still put that link in there because, I think the more people look at it and they get a hold of stuff, it paints a better picture for everybody.
Oh, for sure.
To go. Yeah, I could have missed over a rabbit hole just for timing, but explore that rabbit hole and bring it out to us so that we can get a more cohesive picture of what is going on and where this stuff is going.
Yeah, because it's one crazy spider web. And for the people in the live, or the people who do catch this alive, even if it's like, I guess, a replay of the live, up on the top, I have been trying to remember lately, I have been putting the Occult Research Institute website pinned at the top of the chat. So if anybody who actually wants to go over and look at Brandy's work now or whatever in the future, you can't remember it. Well, first of all, if it's in the link tree, but it's always going to be on the lives. So there's people there now that want to check it out. It's up at the top. Go check out the site. Tons of stuff. I recently added Heinrich Kuhnroth. Eventually, when the episode comes out, I'll also be dropping like the notes and some videos and pictures of that on the site as well. Brandy's been adding stuff. Ethan Indigo has recently. You know, people have been adding a lot of stuff on there in the last month or so, so I highly suggest to go check it out. Thank you, everybody in the chat. There was a lot of great stuff in there. Thank you to the mods, especially. You were all adding a lot of stuff to, I guess, to the topic. That's what's up. I appreciate it. I know, like, the same faces that I normally see, the usual suspects. You know, that's why I go live. I like to see all of you coming back. And there looked like there might have been a few new ones, or maybe I just don't notice you that often. If you're new, thank you. I appreciate it. That's what's up. And that's the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.